Welcome to Biztech's C-Suite Conversation Show. Today we speak to Michael Goh, Chief Operating Officer at IPI Singapore. IPI helps enterprises to stimulate their growth through innovative collaboration and co-creation. Now, Michael, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Brian.
Now, Michael, could you start by giving us an overview of IPI and its history?
Sure, happy to do that, Brian. So IPI, we were started close to 10 years ago by the Singapore government, and the objective of setting IPI up is to be the catalyst of to bring innovation to our local enterprises. So in a nutshell, what IPI do is we are a technology matchmaker. We subscribe to the concept of open innovation. So what we do is we typically sit down with local enterprises, understand their desire to innovate, and what we do is many a times what we do is we sit down and understand what's the business, what is their growth strategy, and how can innovation and technology feature as part of their journey to grow their businesses. So what IPI does is, after understanding the business needs, the growth strategy, and what we will do is internally we will analyze, can technology play a part in the enterprise's growth strategy? If it is a yes, and then what we'll do is we leverage on our global network of technology owners. We call them solvers, and we seek out the relevant technology and, as much as possible, find a close fit technology to the local enterprises who are seeking for this technology to differentiate the product or their services so that they can better compete in this very fast-moving ecosystem. So I hope that gives you a quick appreciation of what IPI does. And we've been doing this for the last 10 years. It's coming this year, we are 11th year. So that's what we do.
So Michael, you're a subsidiary of Enterprise Singapore. So you're part of that overall ecosystem. Is your mandate then really about helping local companies not only grow internally and be innovative, but also to grow outward?
Yes, so IPI is a subsidiary of Enterprise Singapore. We have been set up to operate as an independent company. We have our own board. That gives us, and strategically why we do that is because that gives us flexibility, right? To react to our customers, to react to the changes, the dynamism in the ecosystem. So that is from that perspective. And you're right. So what IPI is set up to do is really to work with our local enterprises and to find the relevant technology or the innovation piece that can value add to them so that they can grow their businesses.
Okay, could you give us some specific examples of companies or sectors that you've helped to innovate and grow rapidly?
Right. We have been, because IPI is a Singapore government funded organization, so we do cover quite a broad spectrum of sectors. It ranges from manufacturing, healthcare, personal care, even to the food, and even to the material space. So we do cover a very broad spectrum. Now, specifically, I think in terms of how we work with companies in these sectors, I think when we play with innovation, it's what we call we are boundary spenders. So from one sector, we spend to the next. And the observation we have made is very often companies in one sector, they have many years and deep domain knowledge. They understand the nuances very, very well. It is only when they want to adopt technology that are not in their core domain. For example, these days we are seeing many people are going digitalization. So for example, a company who have a wealth of data in let's say in the logistics space, they might want to leverage on this data to make sense, business sense out of it. And they could want to leverage on machine learning. We hear so much about AI, so on and so forth. And this is the part where IPI plays a role, where we can take what we observed from the ICT space, Infocom space, and we can introduce to people who are in, say, in the logistics space and say, hey, these are some good stuff that people in the ICT space has developed in terms of the AI, the machine learning algorithms. These are technology that perhaps could help you analyze, make sense of the data that you have captured in terms of your transactions, in terms of your billing. How can you optimize that process? So this is the role of IPI, where we take what we learn from one sector and we share it with the business owners in another sector and say, hey, does this make sense to you? If it makes sense, okay, we are the people that we can help you connect the dots to bring the technology owners and solvers who can address some of your problems. And we've been doing this for the last 10 years. So it's very exciting space. You get to see new technology every day. You get to speak to decision makers on a daily basis. And sometimes, we jokingly say that we are the agony aunt to, hear what's their problem, understand where, the challenges they're faced with, and how can we work together, be part of, their innovation journey.
So this is really all about, and you're a proponent of that, open innovation services, isn't it?
Yes.
Now tell us about, and so part of your mandate obviously is to marry the appropriate technology via your partners and globally, as you mentioned earlier in the interview. Tell us about, and because this is very important then, technology scouting is a big part of what you need to do, and do it constantly. Tell us about your scouting activities in terms of technology and your methodology around sourcing.
Right. So in the world of tech scouting, there's two models broadly. People will talk about demand pull and tech push. So it's not a black and white thing. It's a constant balance between pull and push. So from the tech scouting perspective, obviously for us, we need to keep ourselves abreast on what are the upcoming trends, what technology are relevant to the Singapore ecosystem, right? Not everything is relevant because our businesses, they don't operate in certain sectors. So for those sectors that are relevant, what we do is we constantly keep a finger on what is trending, what is available, and what are the technology that are mature, that the local enterprises can quickly adopt them, integrate them into their businesses or their solution, and then move forward. So this is the part of what we call a scan. So our team of multidisciplinary innovation managers and technology managers is always constantly on the lookout to understand what are the mega trends in terms of the business driver, the regulations. Over and above that, what we also do is to track what are the technological development out there that has developed to a stage where they're mature enough that can be quickly adopted by local enterprises. So this is one aspect of things. Now, as we go along working with many of our clients over the years, we get to understand the business much better. And very often, we have gained a certain level of trust working with them over the years, to the extent that they do share with us their long-term or the mid-term growth strategy in terms of technology adoption. And we become in a sort of an extension of their CTO function. We don't replace them, we don't offer a CTO for service, but we become an extension of them. And the fact that we understand the business well enough and we know what they are capable of, where are their innovation gaps, where are their expertise gaps, we are able to very quickly say, hey, I've spotted something. This piece of technology can perhaps value add to your product or your services that can help improve and help differentiate. So in terms of tech scouting, we do two things. We do scan a broadscape. And what we also do is we understand our clients well enough to say, hey, I'm able to share certain things with you. So as you can see, there's a pull and there's a push.
Yes.
Of course, there's always times where the clients will come to us and say, hey, IPI, I'm looking for certain technology. Can you reach out to your network and help me find this? That happens all the time. Yeah.
I think one of the key things that I take away from what you just mentioned is the fact that scouting, sourcing for technology, and the word maturity comes up quite a lot, because I think that especially when you're dealing in the SME space, some of them are not ready for bleeding edge or cutting edge innovation. It's really about what they can plug in very quickly and see results basically as quickly as possible.
Exactly. I think, Brian, you hit the nail on the head. I think SMEs, we all know SMEs. Lots of entrepreneur spirit there, very gung-ho. They will go out there, capture new market. I think the reality when we deal with SME is they are limited by resources. They have a lot of aspirations. They want to grow. So this is the part where what we do is when we work with the SMEs, we first and foremost not only understand the challenge they face, but we do an internal assessment on whether they are able. So internally, you talk about best practices. We use a very simple methodology we call willing, able, ready assessment, right? Willingness is the mindset. If the business owner, they are willing, they are risk taking, that is the mindset, which is very important. Then are they able? Do they have the means to get into where they want to go? And are they ready? Meaning sometimes we take a look at the in-house, do they have the relevant expertise? Do they have the relevant machines or tools to enable them to have the absorptive capacity to, when we introduce them a technology, whether they can absorb that and internalize that. So we are in the business of not giving them the fish. What we're trying to do is to, in a way, nudge them to teach them how to fish, because that is a longer, more sustainable kind of innovation.
And also, this is where, Michael, I suppose, and you brought this up, very significant, the ability to absorb. And the ability to absorb has to take place with some capacity building internally first.
Yes, yes. So, Brian, you lead me to another part of the business that IPI does. So while we do tech matching, what we also do over the years is we also develop a pool of what we call technology expertise. So these are individuals, they could be consultants, or they could be freelancers, or they could be semi-retired engineers or chief engineers who are at the stage where they say, hey, I'm comfortable, I'm willing to offer my tech knowledge as a service for a fee. So what we do is when company internally, when they do not have this in-house organic expertise, we can tap into this pool of technical experts and we can introduce them to the company and say, hey, why don't you tap into so-and-so who has 10 years of experience in functional coding. He or she will be able to help you translate that technology into an application, working with your engineers into translating the technology in a product. So this is another part how we address the gap in the ecosystem that we see. So as a matchmaker, it's very important for us to be able to plug the gaps of our clients as much as possible.
Now, Michael, what have you seen in terms of the shift in mindsets among entrepreneurs, particularly in the last 2 years?
Oh, yes. and it's a very interesting observation. I think, the Chinese word called 危机, I'm sure, one is danger and the other one is opportunity, right? And it's cliche. I mean, people say it's a cliche, but when you have a pandemic, when you have a global pandemic, it sort of level out the playing field for many, many enterprises. And everybody sits up like, our earlier conversation about, the decision makers are panicking and they are in this coma where they all get very angsty. And what we have observed in the past where people are not so keen in innovation adoption, they say it's a high risk activity, it's not for me, I can wait. But now the reality hits them and say they better do something. And we see this mindset shifts. And I think it's an important move and it's a positive move. But I think at the end of the day, I think many entrepreneurs themselves, they pragmatic people, while they do understand that they need to innovate, there is now there's a push for them to innovate. They are also more measured in a sense in taking risks. They will take more risks now. What I'm trying to say is that while they are open-minded, they are willing to try out things, but they are also very pragmatic on looking at technology that they can quickly internalize, adopt, and this goes back to what I mentioned about looking for technology that have higher readiness. Because if they're higher readiness, the risk level is slightly lower. You defray that risk by working with a higher readiness technology compared to a not so mature technology where the risk of failure or the risk of not achieving what you set out to do is higher. So there is a shift, and I think it's in a positive sense from the innovation perspective.
And also one of the things, particularly in the last 2 years, has happened is because of the fact that technology adoption has become cheaper, and technology adoption is also easier because there are a lot of services that are on demand that you can switch on. You're not committed to huge upfront investment. I suppose then, and that's a trend across the region, SMEs were more willing to make that leap forward because they realized that actually instead of buying a huge ERP system, I could actually just make some monthly investments, try it out. If it doesn't work, I can always turn off the tap.
Yes. So, Brian, that's very, very true for digital technology. So in IPI, we go beyond digital. We deal with other physical technology as well. It can be a waste to energy conversion solutions, or we are looking at coatings. These are a bit more physical rather than digital. I think what you mentioned is very true for the digital space, where you can quickly try on an ERP system, a CRM system. It works for you, great. And then the different business model. These days, subscription it's a norm. We are also seeing the other shifts on the more what we call the deep tech or the physical side of technology, where in terms of the business model, people are talking about leasing rather than putting a capital buy. So there is a shift, and I think everybody is trying to make use of this opportunity and say, hey, let's not go through the business as usual way of doing things. Can we use this opportunity and change the way we do things so that we can be better, be faster and cheaper, and can we capture the market as fast as possible? So that general shift there.
Michael, and I want to drill down on that a little bit. Does IPI and IE Singapore have specific programs in terms of financing those to make the accessible, the technology in the non-digital size more accessible to SMEs?
So in IPI, we do not fund, we do not offer grants. We are very focused on what we do. We are still very much a core technology matchmaker. In terms of the funding schemes, I must say from the Singapore government perspective, from what I have been observing, the government has been very helpful, very encouraging. There are various schemes and grants that are operated by Enterprise Singapore. A little bit, I mean, IE Singapore has been merged together with Spring Singapore to form Enterprise Singapore. So they do have some funding schemes to support local enterprises who are adopting technology. If I'm not wrong, there are various government agencies in their own, addressing this in their own domain. For example, our friends in PUB, they do look at the water-related technology. The National Environment Agency, NEA, they look at environmental related stuff. Even our HDB, they are also looking at various funding schemes to support local enterprises who want to embark on innovation adoption. So I think there is a plethora of all these grants available. It's a matter of the enterprises, local enterprise, SME particularly, who wish to embark on innovation, to have a conversation with these government agencies. They have lots of industry development officers out there who are more than happy to explain to local enterprises how they can leverage on this various grants to defray the cost of adopting technology.
Now, Michael, if I'm an SME owner in Singapore, or I'm a business in Singapore and I'm looking for help in technology, why would I go to IPI versus going to a technology solution provider?
Right. I think, thanks for asking that question. And I think what we pride ourselves in is, because IPI is funded by the Singapore government, we are sort of a neutral party. So in terms of the technology I mentioned about, we have a global network of technology owners. we do not have any exclusive relationship with them.
So you're agnostic essentially.
Exactly. We're agnostic. So what we are here for is we understand what our client needs, and we endeavor to find the closest fit technology that can address their needs for them. That is one part of our UVP. I think the other thing that we play differently is obviously we have a network, and our network is not just network. We do have access to decision makers at the appropriate level, and we are able to reach into some of these decision makers or even the technology owners, which otherwise the local SMEs may not be able to reach in. For example, I do have contacts with the director of tech transfer in MIT and so forth. We can reach into them directly because we know them and they are more open to amenable to have this conversation with us. So that is one part of the network. The third critical piece, and I think this should not be underestimated, is the pool of innovation managers and the technology managers that we have in IPI. First and foremost, they are well versed with technology. They have a good sense of what are the business drivers out there, because technology adoption is not about technology push. It's about what makes business sense, what is viable in the business before you talk about technology adoption. And once that we cross the technology and business hurdle, the third piece come into play, which is the ability to facilitate what we call technology commercialization agreement discussion. Because when we deal with technology, inevitably you are going to end up having a conversation about intellectual property. And we observe that by and large, many local SMEs are not familiar with how do you transact IP, what are foreground IP, how do you structure an agreement in such a manner that you have a win-win between the buyer and the seller in terms of the IP. How do you handle the IP that are going to be created in the future? Because we are talking about collaboration. So these nuances are something that IPI is able to help value add to the conversation when we work with our client. And that is also the reason why we have repeated clients coming back to us. And I think underlying this is the trust that we've built over the years with all this. We have delivered the results what they want us to deliver, but I think it's also the level of trust.
And Michael, which brings me to then an interesting question for 2022. Where are the opportunities and key trends that you see that in 2022 that SMEs can take advantage of?
Right. I think without a doubt, I think digitalization is here to stay. I think we're seeing more of that. As we go into this more connected world, I know it's a cliche. I think data is the new gold. You were sitting on, many companies sit on the wealth of gold, the data that they have. And how do you make sense out of this? How do you draw insights? How do you even adopt business intelligence tools to make sense of what your client wants? How often does your client? So this is one perspective. I think the other aspect is sustainability. I think more and more people are becoming aware about the issues around sustainability. There are lots of opportunity there. In the past, we talk about throwing certain food waste. The conversation now is, can we viralize that? Can we upcycle that? Can we make good use of that? So there is, if you ask me, these are the two key opportunity I see. Of course, the rest still holds. I think the other space I always jokingly tell my colleague is whether rain or shine, whether it's going through an economic downturn, personal care is always forever evergreen. Everybody wants to look good. So these are the three areas, if you ask me, is evergreen. Of course, healthcare it's always there. Yeah. But then healthcare has its own inherent challenge because we are dealing with health of people. There's always the safety requirements. Then you have to go through the necessary safety trials and so forth.
Michael, it's been a fascinating conversation. But before we end this conversation, any final thoughts that you'd like to leave us with?
Because I think in this more connected world, I think what I would want to leave with the thoughts would be perhaps where possible, think about working, leveraging on what others have created, because this is really the concept of open innovation. And if you are able to leverage on what someone else is doing and integrate that successfully into your business, then I think you are able to catch the wave much earlier and much faster, and you are able to move much faster compared to your competitors. So I thought that would be something to leave for food for thoughts.
And on that interesting food for thought, thank you very much, Michael, for taking your time to be on the show.
Thank you for having me, Brian.
Now, I'm Brian Fernandez, and I've been speaking to Michael Goh, the Chief Operating Officer of IPI Singapore, on Biztech's C-Suite Conversation Show. This video and podcast will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our social media platforms. Please like and subscribe to our various platforms. Thank you for tuning in.